All right. Hello everyone. We're doing the reflection video for the objectivity piece. I know I haven't really done much on this channel, and that's just mostly because I don't really want to do the quick thoughts thing anymore, to be honest. I think just sort of grabbing my phone and just sort of talking about things. I guess I just don't think people care, and I just don't really want to spend the time doing it. So we're just kind of canning that. But what the result will be is probably just more focus on this stuff, the stuff that I actually enjoy, and maybe more shorter pieces and things like that. Like I have the idea for a few videos that are going to be super short, so maybe they'll be bonus things, or maybe not part of the main MML's commentaries thing. I don't really know, but really I don't really have too much to say about this one, to be completely honest, but I do have a few things I want to talk about. I want to talk about some production stuff, and then I also want to sort of touch on some of the inspiration and thought process behind this video, and kind of where it came from. So that's what we're going to do. So let's start with the timeline. This is the timeline, Final Cut timeline. It's a good time. A lot of this piece really relied on a lot of external footage. So it was stuff that I went out and filmed myself, obviously with the camera in the park and all that. But there was just a lot I needed to track down. So news footage and over here, I had Zach film a thing over here, getting footage of specific events that I wanted to use as examples. Because not all I did talk about Snowden and the Supreme Court case for, I don't remember the couple's name for this case, but the bakery case. So I did mention some specific examples, but I also wanted to kind of have some consistent examples in the B-roll as well. So that's why I had the Green New Deal over here as a consistent through line over here, and I had the DC protest situation over, I want to say here, yeah, and then I had the New York Times op-ed over here. And those are basically stories that, in 5-10 years, people probably aren't going to be talking about them, to be honest, but they're relevant now, and people are still talking about them now. And because of the fact that they're at least consistent. So I think when people watch a video like this in a few years, they're going to say, okay, well, this is a story that was happening then, and it's just consistent through. It's not necessarily something that will be relevant in a few years, but I think that it sort of paints that picture of just this very divisive, divided country that America is right now, which is sort of the point I was getting into at the beginning, where I was like, hey, it's like we're living in two different worlds based on media outlets, so what's going on? And that kind of plays in the objectivity thing. And as we get towards the end, it's more movie footage and just sort of footage that sort of fits the vibe. I don't really like doing this if I can avoid it. Honestly, I did that a lot in the reviews video, and going back and watching that, it's just kind of I just picked random things to put there, and I just didn't like it. I like the idea of having the things that I'm showing be very deliberately chosen for a very specific reason. And I think, if I had one part of this video that I'd criticize, it'd be this end bit, right? Just because it doesn't really relate to anything. But it was sort of a thing where I don't know what other footage to put there, unless I went out and went and filmed stuff that was way beyond my capabilities in terms of just transportation and budget and things like that. I'm not gonna go to for example, go to the closest city near me when that's a few hours just to film some stuff in a city, for example. I'll just get I'll just get the royalty-free footage for that, or something like that. So really, I guess the main thing with this video, right, is it's sort of just not only picking the right stuff to go in the right spot, and not only just figuring out how to transition between those things, because the transitions are pretty standard, to be honest. It's pretty consistent. Here's me on the bench, so let's have a transition from me on the bench to the content, which is always a slide down. Always, every time. And that creates a consistent style throughout the whole thing, so that way that I'm still sitting on the bench underneath everything. That's sort of the whole idea there. So we're blurring into the dictionary definitions here because I'm still there. So the whole idea is that throughout this whole video, I'm still typing. It creates that narrative. And so that's sort of what I was going for, is you have this sort of like through line narrative of me typing on the computer, telling you what I think. And then at the end of the video, finally, I shut the laptop because I'm saying that let's have a conversation about this, because no one's objective. I'm not objective, yet I'm sort of coming at you from this perspective of like a video essay, looking down on you. So let's just end that. Let's just have a conversation. And it kind of worked out, because during the premiere, a lot of people disagreed with me. And a lot of people agree with me as well, but it's sort of like we had there was an element of that disagreement, and that led to some nice conversation in the comments. It's sort of, I don't think that that visual theming is the reason behind there being discussion in the comments. I think that's the content, but I think sort of hinting at that is pretty cool. So there's that. The other thing, I guess the other big thing would be the actual like dictionary definition motion graphics, and all that was done in Motion. I can actually boot up Motion right now and give you that. So let me find it real quick. I just need to remember where it is. It's probably going to be, that's audio visualizer stuff. I need to think about where this is, so give me a second. Might be in here. Yeah, here it is. It's going to be in here. So let's go into definitions 1. Thankfully, I don't believe there's anything in any of my files that are like personal information that I wouldn't want to show you. So that's pretty good. Just sort of like random stuff on my hard drive. So that's pretty good. So yeah, I guess I'll boot up Apple Motion. I'll show you that project and sort of how the definition stuff panned out. But yeah, like I said, I don't really have too much to say on this. I'm very happy with the filming process. It took me a few takes. I mentioned in the credits that was the second day filming, and that's actually the third attempt, because the first attempt was going to be with one of my friends doing the filming, but I forgot the SD card, so we couldn't film anything. Originally, this whole thing was going to be indoors, the whole thing, and the idea was I was going to go, basically, because I have the 2 dictionaries there, so the idea was it was going to go from indoors where the thing started, and then I was going to go to a library and open the books there, and then I was going to go somewhere else. But unfortunately, libraries are sort of this weird relic of an era before people having cameras everywhere. So filming in a library is one of the hardest things to do in this country, it turns out. Unless you're doing like a formal film shoot. If you have a full crew or something like that, it's easier to get the paperwork for something like that. But for a one-man show on a YouTube video, they just don't care. And so I called and I made the whole thing, and they were basically like, yeah, you got to go to the town hall and ask them. And I'm like, the town hall is like 30,000 more important things to do. There's no way they're going to pay attention to me. And from experience, from what I was looking up online about those kind of experiences, like it's just not happening. So I'm like, all right. And then I looked up other libraries, and they were just even more hopeless. Like, I was hoping to go into a small library and make it easy, because very few people go to that library, and that library is actually closing next year. Fun fact, the library I was going to film at. So I sort of changed the whole thing. And then before I go into the Motion project, I just want to say, just because I think it's a fun fact, that this book here isn't a dictionary. It's actually a Bible, because that was the only other book I could find in this house that had the relative thickness and could be passed off as a dictionary other than the dictionary. Because we had the Merriam-Webster, I found that one, but I don't have an Oxford, and I'm not about to go buy an Oxford dictionary. So I passed that off as the Oxford English Dictionary. So fun fact, if you're wondering why that's just a white cover, it's just the cover of the freaking Bible inside out. So fun fact. Yeah. So here is the Motion project. If you don't know how Apple Motion works, I don't think I've ever shown this in in one of these like reflection videos. So I might as well kind of explain how Motion works. I think it's a program that a lot of people just don't use and don't understand, but it's a really powerful program. The thing is it just people compare it to After Effects, rightly so. And the thing is that if you want to do things in Motion that you can do in After Effects, you're going to fail because motion can't do what After Effects can do. There are a lot of things that After Effects just can do that motion can't. It cannot do 3D graphics in the same way After Effects can. It can't, it can't literally do like full on animated, like, you can get away with like fully animated stuff in After Effects. You don't even need to go into like Flash. You could do it all in After Effects if you were really, really good and had the patience for it. Motion just doesn't have that capability. Motion is very much designed for loopable motion graphic bits. So the idea is that with like moving logos and stuff like that, like motion's better. Whatever. I'll just turn down the volume. The idea is that motion works best in motion. So you have this whole thing here that's this whole graphic, and it's constantly moving. You can kind of see how it all plays out, and then it's just going to go back and start at the beginning again as you keep going. So when you're working on something like a small graphic, then what you do is, okay, I want to work on this specific motion here. Like, forget everything else. I just want to work on this. So then I go over and I just pull this handle back to, back to here where I want that thing to end. And then I can just go and just constantly have this playing back and just look at these movements and make sure they're good and just keep going back and forth. And for something like this, like, that's kind of stupid. You don't really need to pull the handle back. But for something more intricate, like say my intro, which was made in motion, like the little motion graphic, the foomph, and then the text comes out, and then the thing goes into a line and slides off the text. Like, that's something that each little part of it is very good, just having it loopable on its own and working in motion. Where After Effects is terrible with live rendering, where if you have After Effects working in motion, it's just gonna freeze all the time and lag and stutter, and it's gonna be terrible. So that's the real difference between motion and After Effects. That motion's really good for constantly moving like motion graphic titles, transitions, things like that, where After Effects is really good for compositions, things that kind of stand on their own outside of the context of a larger video. So me doing this in motion is honestly stretching the capability of this program kind of to the max, really. I would say, something like this, like if it was any more complicated than this, if I was pulling in multiple definitions and going in more complicated movements than just slides, then I would probably switch to After Effects because it's just better at handling that. But one of the benefits you have with something like motion is that motion basically works like this. Like After Effects, let me go into the inspector over here. So After Effects, in simple terms, is literally this panel, just the Premiere version of it, the After Effects version of it. The idea is that you have all of these attributes, right? And then you just keyframe them and change their values, and that's how you move things, right? So, for example, if you want something to change color, then instead of just going and changing the color of it, what you do is you apply a hue or saturation or colorize effect in After Effects, and then you just key the hue setting on that, and then you can have it change color over time. Or you could just change the color of it and have it stay the same color. But if I wanted to like have this change multiple colors, you would add an effect, a hue effect, and then you would have it go from hue value whatever to hue value whatever, and it would go across the spectral rainbow whatever to get to that color. So that's how After Effects works. After Effects is basically just a giant effects panel with more capability than what you would have in something like Premiere, just on the sheer fact that After Effects is focusing specifically on those attributes. There are things that like it really complicated keyframing and really complicated effects just wouldn't work in Premiere on its own, because Premiere's trying to render a timeline at the same time. Where in After Effects is just trying to focus on that one graphic, so it'll work a bit better. That's like the really simple version of what After Effects is. Motion works differently. Motion has what are called I'll call them attributes, but here they're labeled as properties, right? But this applies to like things like group settings, and if you go into like text or something like that, like text settings or shape settings or things like that, right? Like, so I'll call all of those attributes. I don't think that's the technical term, but I haven't taken the certification test yet, so when I have to do that, if I ever decide to do that, then I would have to learn the fancy names. But The thing that Apple Motion has that something like After Effects doesn't have is something called behaviors. And the idea behind behaviors is that this is a separate entity that is applied to a different thing. So, for example, in the objectivity text up here, okay, we'll go with the objective text. That works too. So this is a type on behavior, which happens right here, right? And the idea is that a type on behavior like this would be very difficult to do in After Effects, because what you would need to do basically is you'd need to create each individual piece of text separately and then have them pop on one at a time. But by having a behavior, it sort of automates that whole process for you. The con of that is that you don't have a lot of control over it, but there is some degree of control over this attribute. So if you go into the inspector, the difference is now instead of having, attributes for a piece of text, for example, now you're having attributes for a behavior. Now, in this case, there isn't a lot to go by. You can change. There isn't really a lot to go by. It's really just you want to fade in the text, so you want to do that. But there are behaviors with more complicated settings. The idea is that this behavior basically is independent of the thing that it affects. And there's benefits to that, because then what you can do is you can quite literally in the timeline go and drag the behavior to a different location. So you can have the text here and then the behavior just kind of applies wherever you put it. So that allows you to do a bunch of different things with it that might be a bit more cumbersome in After Effects if you're doing that kind of thing. So like I said, the reason why I think people say motion works best in motion is because it has to do with all these behaviors interacting with one another and how they affect the main thing. Where After Effects doesn't really handle that as well. But at the same time, what really you have to understand about motion is that everything you can do in motion can be done in After Effects. It'll just take more time. Whereas not everything you can do in After Effects can be done in motion. There is nothing that motion can do that After Effects can't do, other than freaking render properly. That's about it. So really, when it comes down to it, this is actually a pretty simple motion project when it comes down to it. So you have this guy slide on from the side. You have the type on behavior on the text, and then you have basically just a line with a crop keyframing going along there to create the line. And then with things like things moving from behind things, all that is masking. And if you don't know what masking is, I'm not going to go into that because this is way longer than I already expected it to be completely honest. But it's basically just like, oh, I'm going to put an invisible object here that either shows or hides things. So like if I want to put a wall in front of this that you can't see this specific object, but everything else is still visible. So it sort of just allows you to control things like that. So like there is no object, right? There is no black box that's hiding the noun, but there is a box. Like, there's no black box on screen that's hiding the noun, but there is a black box that you can't see that is hiding the noun right now, if that makes sense. And then it slides from behind that invisible box, that's the best way to explain masking, but it's probably a bad way of explaining, to be honest. Anyway, so we have other stuff, but then it's like this slides down and types on using the type on attribute. And then this slides back up and back down with the full definition of objective as this changes, right? So this peeks out and then comes in like that. And then we slide over the other definition and then slide back in the original, do this whole thing with a bunch of other things. I labeled it as mess. One of the other things that you can do with motion that's fairly useful is you don't need to pre-compose. So if anyone's familiar with After Effects, what you need to do, if you want to apply something to a group of objects, you need to pre-compose them, which basically requires you to compile it into a thing and then apply it to that thing, where basically you don't need to compile anything in motion. It sort of just does it for you on the fly. So everything automatically is organized into groups, and you can create more groups and just affect those groups immediately. So it's, once again, something that can be done in After Effects and has the same capability, but it can just be done faster, given what specific things motion is designed for. And then we have this zoom in, and that's pretty much it for that. And the other graphics are very similar to that. So it really just is like, okay, I just wanted to make this, have a certain flow and vibe to it, and that's kind of what I did in motion. Yeah, so that's really that. I guess that's really all I got, because I talked about the filming stuff. I talked about having the conversation. I really, what this video is it was like there were so many videos out there saying that, like, oh, my videos are subjective. But I think the thing is that a lot of them sort of missed the point, in my opinion. I think the idea that saying my videos are subjective, suddenly that's a defense of your own content. It's like you're hiding behind that subjectivity and saying, you can't criticize me, or you can't say that I'm wrong because I'm subjective. I think that's a bad defense. I think really what you gotta say is that it's not that I'm subjective, right? It's that everything is subject to our own perspectives and backgrounds. So it's not that I'm subjective, so you can't argue with me. It's I'm subjective, so let's hear your perspective. I made my video, but like I just made a video because I like making videos. But I want to hear your perspective, because your perspective is subject to, you know what I mean? Your opinion is subject to your perspective. It's different, and I want to hear it. And I think that's the most exciting and interesting part of it all, So I think the idea of you coming down from this platform of authority, whether you say it's, oh, I'm subjective, but I have this following, so clearly my perspective is more. No, everyone's perspective is important, but it's just about how well you argue it. It's about how you explain yourself, what evidence you use, and how agreeable that evidence is for people. I mean, if evidence itself is somewhat subjective to a degree, it's subject to how the data was obtained, it's subject to funding, it's subject to all these different kinds of things, all these different predispositions that exist even in the most scientific and data-driven fields, right? But the idea is that you reach this consensus through repetition. You do enough tests, and then you realize, oh, this thing we can agree that this thing is true because we've proven it to be true enough that we accept it, until at which point we prove it false, right? There's a scientific hypothesis, right? And then we have a theory, which is like backed by something, and then eventually we prove it through experimentation. But whether that proven is accepted as being true is subject to the society that we all live in. So, yeah, but this sort of reiterating the points of my video. But really, it's like I was in. There's this whole conversation I have with people about like journalism, because I was a journalism student, and it's like journalists should be objective, and it's the same kind of thing as like these people making videos and hiding behind subjectivity. It's like the same logic applies. It's like the person that you see on the news that tells you the thing, they're not better than you. They're not anything relative to you other than the fact that they spent more time looking into the thing, right? The idea of news is so that way you don't have to go and interview people and do the research on all of these really important topics that everyone should know about. Journalists are compilers. They compile all the information into a digestible format for you to understand. But that doesn't mean that compilation is fully representative of everything that's going on, right? And that applies to every outlet. So I think really what it comes down to is it's like, no one's objective. No one should like hide behind their subjectivity and their bias, right? It isn't an excuse. That really what it's about is it's like, well, let's all think critically. Let's all constantly challenge ourselves. Let's all constantly challenge our opinions and perspectives, because we're all informed by different backgrounds and we want to be understanding of more people. That's kind of where I was coming from with this. So it's a 12-minute video, and I know I didn't like go into all of that, right? Because honestly, I think that going into the full like breakdown of all that, I think the more verbose you get with those kind of things, the more saturated it gets, the more like, I wanted to keep it simple and to the point, and then, I'll leave out some information and that I want to say, because it's like that I can save that for the conversation. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need to get my whole I don't need to like just puke all over this thing and just like, tell you everything. It's like I just need to introduce the concept. Here's my thesis, here's my argument, here are the things I'm using to back it up, and then like all the stuff that's somewhat tangential or aside and stuff like that, let's save that for the conversation. I don't need to like tell you my whole life story. I don't think that's important to this video. But obviously, if you listen to this thing, then I guess you did hear a lot of it, but that's okay. I guess this is more of a behind the scenes thing, so I guess it sort of works. But that's I mean, I talked about this longer than I thought I would, so hey, thank you for listening to this. You could have watched like the main video probably like 3 or 4 times in the time it took to get through this, but I appreciate it. Really, the main reason I needed to do this today is because I need to delete this event, because I just imported all of this Mario Odyssey footage because I 100% in Mario Odyssey minus 1 moon that I'm just not getting, because it's gonna take like hours of my time just to get the one last moon. I'm not doing it, sorry, but we got a lot of footage here. Odyssey, the Balloon World minigame, all sorts of fun stuff. So we got all this footage of Odyssey, and basically one of the big issues I had with this video is that when I was editing it, a lot of slowdowns and freezes and things like that. And the main reason is just because there's a lot of footage here, and Final Cut, it's not, it didn't crash on me. Premiere would crash on me, but like when you're dealing with a lot of footage, it coming from a lot of different sources, and you're pulling from multiple hard drives and things like that, like it's just a mess, right? So you generally, the good code is to put all your footage on one hard drive, but even then it isn't formatted properly for the editor to just work. So the real best solution is to create proxy media, which is basically, it's basically media that's designed for the format and that this player likes, right? It's not the best format for internet streaming or anything like that, but it's media that'll work best for this timeline. And then when you export it, it replaces the proxy media with the original media and then just exports it. So I basically just needed to create a bunch of proxy media for all this Mario Odyssey footage, which means that in addition to the imported original media on this hard drive that I'm tapping that you can't see, there's also all of the proxy media on this hard drive, which basically turns 200 gigabytes of footage into like 300 plus gigabytes of footage. So it's like I just need to get rid of this event because the hard drive's filling up. So thank you all for listening to this. And if you're all about Mario Odyssey, then I guess you'll enjoy this video when it comes out. And then after that, we'll find out later. Here's royalty-free raps. I got rhythm, rhyme, wasted time, corny lines. Hope you don't mind. I left YouTube, quit, bullet, bit, left to rap over royalty-free crap. I'm out of here.